What's up, guys? This is Eric Codes here, and on another walk, going over, switching from PHP to Rails development, and it's going pretty well. Aside from one issue, I did a whole video about it. I don't think it constitutes as a video on its own, but long story short, I'll surmise it here, was if you watched, one of my previous videos, I was saying stuff about like how you need to make sure when you start a Ruby project, you know all of the different things that you're going to want to have. Like, so if you want Bootstrap in there, if there's a certain JavaScript builder you want in there, right? XYZ. You need to, what type of database you want. You need to kind of like know that at the beginning of the project, because it's a lot easier to let Rails configure all that stuff than you trying to do it. And I said I ran into a whole bunch of issues. Well, I thought that was the case. Might still be. I mean, that probably still is good advice. But when I went to build a project last night, God, I've built this project 500 times now, but again, this is how you learn. But when I built the project, I was running into that same problem with Bootstrap again. I was like, what the hell? It worked on my Windows machine. Why isn't it working, on my Mac? What is the problem here? Found out that the reason I kept getting the message that it couldn't figure out what JavaScript to use was because there is a command you need to run that is bin/dev. And when you run bin/dev, it's what compiles all the CSS and all the JavaScript so that your program can actually read it. Which is why I couldn't find it, because I was running Rails server. Yeah, so just so you know, Rails server only going to serve like the Ruby files and the routes and all that stuff. So if you have custom CSS and whatnot, it's not going to work. So you need to actually have that, in your package.json file. It needs to compile and put all that stuff together and, pull everything in and run Node. And so that's why. So I didn't get super far last night on more to talk about. Aside from, because it's so sad, but figuring that out took like 2-3 hours, maybe 2. So in the last hour, what I really did was I started to familiarize myself with the structure of a Ruby on Rails application. So I give a brief overview of the things that are super important. The first of which is that I think we already talked about the fact that Rails is MVC, which means model view controller. Again, model is like a snapshot of what the database is. The controller, does all the logic, all the business logic, all the stuff, and then passes all that stuff to the view for the view to use it. So it's a 3-part system, right? And I'd said, there's a nice command that you run, which is scaffold. You tell it to create a scaffold, and it'll do all the views that you need for CRUD applications. So you're going to create, read, use, update, delete. It'll do all that stuff, generate the views, generate the routes. It does it all. However, it's not helpful if you don't know actually how it works, right? Yeah, it's great that it does it, but you should understand what it's actually doing, okay? So I guess what I'd say is all starts with the controller. Yeah, I would say it's going to start with the controller, because you don't necessarily need something from the database to show a page, okay? But so it starts with the controller. And in Rails, inside of your app, so when you look at all those files, there's an app file. You go into that app file. Inside of that app file, you're going to find something called controllers. So you first start by making your controller for your thing. So for me, that controller was pages controller. So pages underscore controller.rb, right? Make a Ruby file. Then you're gonna make a class in there, okay? So you would say class, you would name it the same because obviously, you know, you want to keep naming conventions. So you say class pages controller, right? Then you're going to pull in the application controller. So that's basically extends. So in Ruby, it's a less than sign. Yeah, so it's a less than sign and then application controller. And that basically says that we are going to pull in all the functionality, you know, we're extending that application controller. So then when you get in there, you're going to define functions. So for instance, if you said home, let's say that's what we were looking for. So you would say def home end. You don't really need anything in the function. You just need to have the method there. Okay. So that would be our controller, right? But how do we actually get to that controller? Well, that is why we have a routes file. So then we go down to the routes file. And this is where you have, you know, get, post, all those different actions that you would do. So when you get to your routes file, routes.rb, and that's not within the app, that's in the root folder. It's in the root or it's in the config, one or the other. So you go into your routes folder, and then once you're there, you need to go to where all the routes are defined. There's probably one already there when you launch your app originally. So you'll make a new one, you'll say get, and then what the route is going to be defined as, right? So get, and then you put like / home, right? Because we called the function home, I think. Yeah, so get / home. You want to try to keep your naming conventions the same way all the way through, right? So get home, then a comma, and then you're going to say to with a colon, and then you're going to map that to the function that we want to return, or the method that we want to return, right? So when we're home, I'm sorry, not home, pages, / pages, important, / pages, then we want to say to pages, hashtag home, right? So that's going to direct us to the home method on the pages controller. Follow me? Great. So again, that's how the route, when you go to that route, it loads the controller, okay? That route says to use the home method on that controller. What's the home method? Well, the default for this is, the way the Rails works, is it's going to return a view that matches the name of the controller. So we go down to our views file. We create a folder because the folder is really important. It works so that it looks for the name of the folder. So we create a folder, we name it pages. And within that folder, we're going to create, can you guess? Can you guess what was the name of our method? Home, right? So we're going to create a home.html.erb, which is just embedded Ruby file. Okay? Now, the way this is going to work, because the way the Rails is set up to work, this is how it's set up. When we visit / home, / home. I can't remember. / home. That's what the route should be, not / pages. / home. We hit / home. It's directed. It says, look for pages, right? So we want the pages controller. Look for pages. And then the hashtag tells it what function. The function says, you know, def home. So it's going to say, look into the pages view, find the file with the name home, and put it in the browser. And that's kind of how that works. And if you can understand that, 90% of what you're going to do is that sort of work, right? Because once you can load a page, you have no problem anywhere else, right? Once you can load a page. So, you know, I could tell you where you have a JavaScript file or JavaScript folder within that app. You also have what is it called? I don't think it's style sheets. I think it's style sheets is within, another maybe assets, then style sheets is a folder. And then you'll find if you're using Bootstrap like I was, you'll find, I think it's bootstrap.css or .scss or I don't remember, but it's something like that. When you configure it, it automatically names it. So, but that's where that is. So if you want to write your CSS, it goes in there, right? So that's the basic idea of how all this works. And the same thing goes for the JavaScript. You write your JavaScript in that JavaScript file. I'm sure you could get more. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's the idea. That's the file structure. That's how Rails is kind of put together. And as long as you follow that layout, right, you're golden, And then in that controller, eventually, we're going to want to show some data. So you'll define a function in there that's, I don't know, whatever, you want to call it. Let's say it's like get all posts or something like that, right? So you define the function get all posts. You pass it the model, which, depending on your name for it, probably already has it, right? And then you write the functionality of that, what you want to do there. Then you are obviously going to load the view. You need to pass all that stuff to your view, and then you can use it, right? So you could use that function, get all posts in the embedded Ruby. That's it. It's simple, and then you just follow that configuration. Again, configuration over customization. Just follow the Rails way of doing things, and your app will be fine. All the crazy extra stuff got to be taken care of by Rails, or the extra libraries that you pull in. Like if you need, a login system or whatever it is, you may or may not. Who knows? That's an outside library you pull in. And you're golden, man. That's about it. That's all there is to it. So now I understand that the app should go a lot faster. Again, it's always hardest when you pick up something new in the very beginning, but if you take the time to struggle through things like I just did, you're going to be able to have an understanding of it, and then actually be able to talk about it and say, hey, this is how this works, And I'm sure there's probably something easier than I did. There's probably a more efficient way to do it. But again, this is just me going through the process and learning, which is why I think, people are watching this vlog that I'm doing, because this is how I think some people wonder, how did you get into programming, or how did you change your career to programming? How did you do this? How did you do that? It's like, I'm telling you right here, I don't have any Ruby experience outside of when I first played with it a couple months ago. I installed it. I said, hey, I think I want to try this, and I want to add Shopify to my business. And, I played around with Ruby on the site itself, because there's a spot where you can kind of get the basic syntax. I did that. Then I installed it. I ran into some problems with installation. But I got it up and running, and then I just really have a second to learn it again. And then I was like, so I'm going to get my room back soon, because my son is about 7 months old now, and he is ready to spread his wings out of my wife and I's room and go into his own. But get my room back, and then I get back to my main work machine. And so that's why I wanted to get, as ready as I possibly can to get back into my workflow. Because again, my business, that's not during the 9 to 5, that's 9 to 5 is for my company, the company I work for. And then after 5, it's for me, and so most of my development's at night. But that's the thing, like, I get done with work. As soon as I get done with work, usually I see the kids for a little bit. We do their showers, we do dinner, we do books and bedtime, get them in bed. And then I go right back to work, but I'm working for my business then, you know? But this is how you do it, guys. Like, this is how you learn, and this is how you get to where you want to be, right? Am I where I want to be? No. But the steps that I'm taking are going to get me there, right? Just day by day, keep trying. Again, this is how I left hospitality and got into coding and programming, right? So I go one day at a time. Anywhere where I could program at my job, my hospitality job, I took the advantage and I did it. I used it, and I made tools they probably didn't need, but they were helpful. You know, there were things that the housekeeping department was using. Like there were things that were useful, and it helped, again, solidify all of this stuff, right? And once I got that first job, right, I was a VBA developer, and that sucked. Plain and simple. Like, I didn't like the language, you know. I didn't like working with the constraints of Microsoft Access program. Like, that just sucked. Like, I felt so stuck in the way that we were doing it. There was no documentation. I felt confused all the time. Like, I didn't like that. I kept stuck with it. You know, I powered through it. But it was nice because we got projects that were in PHP, right? I was like, any of those projects, that's what I look forward to, right? And then I built my own business in there, right? I built my own thing. And I started doing WordPress development. I learned all the WordPress development. And I started making money at it. And then people started hiring me. Then I stopped having to advertise so much and do podcasts and all these different things because people were now coming to me, right? Because they saw, hey, you did so-and-so's website. Hey, can you help us with ours, you know? And then that got better. And then I got better at that. And then a job came up that, you know, I got a job offer doing what I do now, working in PHP. Great. I've been doing that I just came up on a year now doing that. And a year and a month. But you know, there it is. I'm there. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm doing web development. And now I'm like, hey, Ruby's the next challenge. Ruby on Rails. So let's add it. Let's grow the business. And then who knows? Maybe I find a job as a Ruby developer that just pays better, right? Maybe I don't. Maybe I do. Either way, it doesn't hurt me to learn this stuff, you know, and it keeps me sharp, and it shows me how things are done other ways, so that maybe the next time I go into something else, I'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. This makes sense. I get what's happening here, right? And that's why Rails came so easy. Sorry, I just got stung by a bee. That's why Rails came so easy, because I've already done a lot of the stuff in Laravel, right? So it's already familiar to me. So anyways, I guess that's my bit of advice on top of just kind of talking about the file structure and the struggles and all that stuff. Is the only way you're gonna learn it is by doing it. You could sit there and watch somebody else do it. You know, there's a lot of great tutorials on YouTube that'll show you exactly what you need to do. And then you're gonna follow blindly on how they're doing it. And then you'll be like, go to write a program or do something, you'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing. How do I do that again? And then you refer back to the video, and you never actually learn. So struggle through it. Get errors like I did for 2 nights. Spend 2 hours figuring out you're running the wrong command, because guess what? That's going to, in the long run, serve you very, very well. But anyways, that's what I have for today. Again, this is Eric Codes. Hope everyone's doing well out there. Catch you next time.